Yeah. So can you describe your journey to your current leadership position in college, and then what key leadership roles have shaped your path?
Yeah. So, oh, I tell this story a lot. I'm in Northwest Illinois. I'm at Sauk Valley Community College, rural area, birthplace of Ronald Reagan. So that usually puts us on the map in some way. I've been coming to my college since I was 4 years old, and I say that because my my own mother, when she came back to school, she did not finish high school, and I was the youngest of the three children. She said, "I'm going to go back to school," and I was only four, and she said, "But I'm going to take him with me, and I'm going to put him in childcare." So I was in childcare here at the college as 4 years old, and never, did I realize at 4 years old that my life was already taking shape in terms of my love for the community college. So I spent time here as just an infant, if you will, and then came back, of course, through my childhood many times. And then I was a student here. I ended up meeting my wife here. She was sitting next to me in a government class when I was a freshman. Then I transferred and I became a police officer after I graduated from the university. And, I loved police work because I just loved community work and just really wanted to be a part of community solutions and loved my career in law enforcement, had no intention of ever leaving. And then the college, like throughout all of my life, called upon me again and said, "Hey, you want to come back and be an adjunct?" And I thought, "Oh, that'd be kind of fun." So I became an adjunct instructor teaching criminal justice. And I only did that for a year before I just, of course, gravitated right back into the school again and became a full-time faculty member. And then about 3 years into full-time faculty, I started getting some interest from other administrators to join them. And at the same time, I went to a conference and met the Ferris people. And that's when those linkages happened. And I went back to school, became a dean. And just about the time I was graduating Ferris, I had an opportunity to become chief academic officer, the role I'm in now as a VP. And then I'm also chief student services officer. So being a fairly small school, you get to be in several different roles. So it's kind of fun. My provost is probably the best way to describe what I do. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I'd be in this role, right? So I would say that the community service is what drew me to this pathway, is that I felt like as much as I loved law enforcement and being a part of the community there, I could do the same thing here and give back to the college that has just meant so much to me and my family. So I left here for a year in 2018. I actually became a president of a small technical college in Tennessee. And I did that because I thought it was time.
Mm.
And I was finishing second place in about every search. And the Ferris people will tell you that. And I know why it was. I mean, I was 35 years old,
Mm.
and I'm sure that a lot of people just weren't ready to take a shot at me. And I found a small school in Tennessee that said, "Yeah, come try us." And, I did it for a year, and it really was not, it was technical college. It was very small. It just did not feel like community college to me. So I really didn't even sell my home here.
Mm.
Um, my wife stayed here while we were going to transition there, and she ended up getting a dream job offer here. She's a local school superintendent.
So,
So I decided to, like, I'm going to stay the year and go back. So I essentially got my old job back here. So we call it my sabbatical year around here. So since then, I've been in the same role. I'm 42 years old now. Absolutely love what I do, love who we serve. And, my journey has just mainly been about the community college mission, public service, transformation, access, getting myself to the table at any conversation I can in the community to help. And I have not found yet a place in our community where the community college doesn't have a seat at the table or shouldn't have one. We are the community's college, and we are just available to everyone in all ways. And that's, the greatest thing we do is the toughest thing we do, which is that we serve absolutely everybody. And
Mm.
college students are getting younger, and it feels like they're getting older too. So, which is really neat because we've got this broad spectrum of students that we're serving like never before, which comes with some challenges. And I'll give you those when we get to that question.
Yep, I do have some questions about that. So curious, one of the common themes I'm picking up, and this has a little less to do with leadership styles, but pathways. We've got a good smattering of presidents that I've interviewed that have that have been faculty before, and they've kind of went the same role that you have up through as a dean and then made their way through there. Also, we've had some that have come up through maybe student services side as directors, but again, same
Yep.
sort of path. Most everybody has said that at some point in their career, if they really wanted to take their career seriously, there was probably going to have to be a move involved somewhere. Is that pretty typical in
True.
your experience?
So I was told that I've worked for two presidents now, and the first president who was really a mentor to me, and my current president is too by all means, but he said, when he was retiring, he said, at some point, you're going to get called somewhere else. And he says, you spent your whole life here. It's okay to go. And I kind of, I probably jumped on that too early.
Hmm.
I went too early, and I didn't need to necessarily do that yet. I had little kids, and I've come to realize right here is really where I belong now.
Mhm.
And I still feel like long term, given my history here, I believe in that advice, but I also believe that you go where your strengths are and where you have relationships. And I have that here in place now. So I feel like I'm in a great position here now if I were to pursue that next step.
Hmm.
But I'll say the job market is great everywhere. The world needs great leadership and they're counting on us. And I feel like you can go anywhere you want now in the community college industry, but goodness of fit matters and where you're serving matters. So you definitely want to take the time to make sure that the chemistry is there for you as well.
Mhm. That I imagine that can be rough without being in the college and understanding. It feels like there could be some things that and this is just an aside. It feels like there could be some things that you might be stepping into something you didn't expect, right? So there is a bit of safety and comfortability in like being where
Oh yeah, when you make the move,
yeah.
yeah, you want to do all the research you possibly can. And I think about where I'm at now. I sit between two cornfields. We're very rural. So if I were to go to a very urban area, it probably would not be the best fit for me.
Mm.
I don't know that I would best serve them. And that's something you really want to take a look at.
Mhm.
Is it's kind of like falling in love. I had a dean recently who applied for a VP job, and she said to me, I'm going to go look at this job, and I'm just doing it for repetition and getting warmed up to the process. Well, no, she went and interviewed and fell in love. She came
Mm.
back and her eyes were she was just glowing. And I said, this is turning into more than just a one-time date, isn't it? And she said, yes. She goes, it really is. It was a great fit. The people were great. I was open. They were open. And I feel like I know everything about them, which is important. And that includes digging deep to do your research as far as looking at accreditation reports and where they've been and where they're going. But and who you work for matters. So I challenged her to really get to know who their current president is and what his leadership style is, and that all checked out very well. So a lot of times you're involved with a search firm, and they will tell you everything.
Mm.
They're usually brutal honest with you, even the things they think you might be doing wrong, like even in your interview process. So
Yeah.
that helps a lot, actually. It's
Yeah.
constructive feedback.
Mm. Thank you. That's excellent advice. So kind of moving in now to the leadership qualities, what specific leadership qualities do you think has been crucial in your rise to your current position? And how have these qualities kind of influenced your decision making or your interactions with other people?
So to answer your question, a lot of these things that I have just found out, even in my prior career and this one, they all still come down to like three things for me. And they're the 3 C's, as I call them.
Okay.
Caring is always number one.
Mm.
You have to care. And people, they have to feel that you care. The second one is change.
Mm.
So we are just always managing change. And I tell my employees now, if you don't like change, because a lot of people say that, right?
Mhm.
You probably like it more than you realize if you work at a community college,
Hmm.
because we are just doing it all the time. Every day we're responding to new change and new needs and transformation. And it's a really cool thing to do, but it's an important thing to manage well. And a lot of that comes through committing to training and being a great communicator, which is the third C.
Mm.
You want to over communicate, but not overwhelm. So those are the three things I really emphasize as a leader. And there's more work to be done than there is hours in the day. But if you can communicate and always be transparent and tell everybody everything you possibly can without compromising things, it is worth it. Now, I spend a ton of time. Everybody knows I am an avid multitasker, but at the end of the day, I feel like I did the most important thing I needed to do, which was make sure everyone was informed, they got their questions answered. You managed emotions as a part of that, because that's a huge part of managing change. And really, you gave them a safe place. Everybody wants to feel safe, and that's an important thing when you're managing that change. And then I think above all those things, the most important thing above all of those things, and it's not a C though, is understanding your mission.
Mm.
What you do and know your mission. Like, so when we undergo a mission change or revisions to our mission, vision, or values, I always say it's important that you know your mission and that you can in some respect say the mission. So when people ask what you are about, you can say it. And I tie all my decision making back to it. So somebody asked me why we did something, I love to just say it's in our mission.
Mm.
So, an example is sometimes I get a lot of backlash about dual credit.
Sure.
So, dual credit in Illinois, it's high school classes taught by high school faculty that are qualified to be college instructors. So sometimes people see that as, I've heard the comparison to, they're eating our lunch, they're taking our credit hours, they're taking our students. And a lot of times it's very cost effective, sometimes even free in some states.
Yeah.
And I always say that's our mission though. That is access.
Mm.
And if we don't provide that, another college or university will gladly come in and gobble that up. So it really is our role as a community college to provide that access, serve those people. And a lot of those students are not coming to our college. So it's an opportunity to salvage a relationship with them that we maybe were not going to have anyhow. So those are the main things I would emphasize in leadership. And, I think it's important to always train on leadership too. I think people overlook that. Leadership is now a degree. Talking about it is important. Training on it is important. Reading books in every way. I think it's always important to stay sharp on it and understand leadership and the challenges that come with it. I think it's very therapeutic as leaders because it can be really lonely at times, and it's important that you don't feel that way.
Wow. And that's a great example too, by the way, very actionable. So with all that being said, how would you define your leadership style? And
my leadership style, I know this sounds cliche, but it really is servant.
okay.
But it's really focused on continuous improvement. So where are we at? Where are we going? What do I need to do to help you get there? And then I always tell people we don't do anything alone. So I always feel like as a community college, no matter what's on your plate right now, there is somebody here that can help you with that, or you can consult with on it. You can huddle up with somebody. There's always a way to help guide one another through challenges, but then also to celebrate the successes together too.
So at what point, and I think I know the answer just based on the interview so far, but at what point did you determine that that was an important leadership style to undertake, in your path to where you're going? And how have you strengthened that along the way once you did make that decision that, this is how I want to lead?
Yeah, I think a lot of it came from my prior career. My prior career, the focus was just always on training in law enforcement. Always be ready, stay ready so you are ready, help others, grow others. And that last one probably stands out the most to me, is always be a good mentor to other people and help pay it forward. So all along the way, I've had people right in front of my eyes in plain sight that were helping me do that. And then as I went into the role, I realized, okay, now it's my turn I think I need to make sure I'm doing that for others too. And then I always feel like I have another, they call it board of directors in your life, who are always there for you too and giving you guidance, honest guidance sometimes, and critical guidance that I think is important feedback as well. So you always want to have a couple people, but then you always want to make sure you're shaping other people's lives too and paying it forward to them as well, because those people were always in my life and they saw things in me that maybe I didn't see in myself too, that I think is an important role. And we do that as community college professionals all the time. We take people's lives and see things in them that they don't realize yet either. And we reshape their lives here, and we see them become graduates and do amazing things.
This is off the cuff. I haven't asked this question, but it just got me thinking. How much of that leadership style do you carry into your personal life as well?
A lot. So I'm very task oriented too. So even like at home, my wife's always like, come on, will you come sit down on the couch and just watch a movie? I'm like, I will, but I got to do this, this, and this before I can get my mind off of it and I can sit there and concentrate on it. So, I'm always thinking about the next thing that really needs to be done. And I'm not a worrier, but I'm just a thinker, and so it's important, to, in your personal life, separate too and have compartmentalize and be able to enjoy activities and have balance in your life. That word balance comes out a lot in leadership, but it is healthy, and I have a lot of hobbies, but even in my hobbies, they trigger me because I love what I do and I love the work of a community college. They trigger me. They're thought provoking, right? So my boss, the president, he's an avid cyclist. That guy will ride like 100 miles in a day. But when he goes on a bike ride, he comes back with a lot of ideas. So I always ask him if he's been on bike rides. So I do a lot of walking with my dog. I have a big chocolate lab, and a good lab is a tired lab, as I was once told. So I take my lab on a lot of walks, and on those walks, they're a nice stress relief, and they take the edge off. But then you get to thinking about things you want to do. So I think it's important to have balance in your life, but also have a healthy hobby too that I think helps sharpen you as well.
Mhm. So kind of getting back around to that thing that you had talked about, colleges often face complex and diverse challenges. So can you talk about a significant challenge that you encountered as a leader, and then how your leadership style kind of helped navigate you through that?
Yeah, I think about how, again, the word change, community colleges have changed over the years. And I think some of that change has came with some of the biggest challenges. And a challenge that stands out to me now from 20 years ago when I was a student here is that competition is greater than ever. So we used to not even have to hardly market, right?
Mm.
I mean, we were the show in town, and everyone came to us. And if they didn't come to us, they went to a university or they hit the workforce. But, we were able to reap a lot of enrollment by just being here.
Mm.
Now, you can go to college in any way you want. So competition is greater than ever. And it's exciting because it's wider access, right? But now, you have to work harder. And I feel like community colleges probably more than ever now have to be entrepreneurs as well. So one theme I think you're going to hear a lot from leaders is the need to fundraise more than ever,
Mm.
the need to be very community oriented. I think any of the sort of dictator style leadership of the past is going to be hard in the future, because people want to connect with their community colleges. They want to have community servants as leaders. And I think that not making those connections in the community is going to be detrimental to any leadership.
Hmm.
So managing the change, managing the competition, that's really important, because let's just say there's something you can't provide, even if it's a scheduling thing, they can find it just about anywhere you want. In fact, that was the reason I came to Ferris.
Hmm.
I was registered to go to Northern Illinois University as a doctorate student, and then I heard about the Ferris program, and I thought, wow, that's everything I'm looking for, including the weekend classes. And
Mhm.
so I'm going to go to Ferris. And then
Hmm.
I started making trips, the 5-hour trip to Grand Rapids quite often. And occasionally in Big Rapids, I'd stay the summer for the week. But, that access and that innovation really changed competition. And we see that now in community colleges too, that you can get access any way you want it.
So on the next one, you talked about communication as one of your important 3 big steps. And so my question is, it is a vital aspect of leadership, but how do you ensure effective communication with all your stakeholders? And can you share an example of how that style of communication has had positive outcome?
Yeah, so you use all methods of communication. I know that sounds exhausting, but it's important,
Mhm.
especially when you're trying to reach students. Everything from certainly phone calls, emails, personal meetings, notes, social media, even those little text messages and the blasts that go out, all those things are really important. So you have to stay really dynamic in communications now. Don't be afraid of any of them. Make sure you're balancing those out. And another thing I'll say too, and I always mention this, don't avoid anything either. If you've got something going on, tackle that problem, go after it, strategize it first, of course. Don't go after it recklessly, but I think a huge part of leadership is having conversations that have never been had before and knowing how to navigate those. And yes, they make you nervous, and yes, you can be fearful of those, but there's a lot of victories to be gained when you can resolve some things that have been problems.
Hmm.
The other thing I'll say too, it's really important, is your team is mobilized. Make sure that you don't just have one person doing all the communicating, right? If you're a VP and you've got deans or you've got faculty members, make sure you're getting to them in several different ways, whether it's stopping by their offices or, I know everybody talks about the open door policy and those types of things, but make sure that you're mobilized and you're active. It's easy to just go to your office and sit and do 8 hours of work. It really is, especially if you're a student as well, working on a doctorate program. But the value of connecting with someone in person or just by phone or by voice it's priceless. So I think that builds relationships and that builds trust. And when you've got that trust, that's the foundation of everything. So I've never worked for an organization that doesn't say they have communication problems. Everybody in some way has different thoughts on communication and how it should go. But it is always an uphill battle, I think, for a lot of organizations, but I don't think it's for a lack of trying. It's just how do you reach people?
So I want to touch on two things. One you said there and one before. You talked about change as one of your three important pillars. And so change and adaptability is important, right? Especially with our educational landscape, how it operates. Can you describe a situation where you had to adapt your leadership approach to address a new or unexpected circumstance that came up? And what was the outcome there?
Yeah, one that stands out to me was it's probably been 10 years now. It's hard to believe, but feels like yesterday because you think about it so often. Our college decided as part of a retention effort, we were going to create a first year experience. And what that means is a mandatory orientation for students and a mandatory first year experience class, a 1 credit hour, once a week class, a 1-2 punch, and it was mandated. Anytime you say that word mandate, get ready. So mandate is a word you have to delicately use, but sometimes you just have, as we talk about student success here, sometimes you just have to have the courage to make students do things they don't want to do. That's good for them.
Mhm.
So we did a lot of research on it. We had Noel Levitz involved. If you know Noel Levitz and their background research, they came to campus. They helped us shape some things. And then one day the president called me in, and I was a dean at the time, and he said, "We're going to do this." And I said, "Okay, great." And at the time, student services owned that. They were in charge of enrollment processes and orientation and onboarding. Well, he took it from student services and he gave it to academics and he gave it to me. So immediately I felt like we had silos going, right? But one of the biggest things I had to do was go to student services, get together with them and say, I want to build off everything you've done and I need you to be a part of this. And I want to build trust with you and I want to build a long-term relationship with you all. And I want to do this together and I want to have a shared vision together. That helped a lot. And again, that was a conversation that was difficult and I thought was going to be hard. And I thought they were probably going to be angry with me, but it actually showed that I cared. And I think it showed them that we were going to work together and that we were not going to dismiss things of the past that were successful. So trying to build upon what was already great, but moving things forward, and I won't say forgetting the past, but creating a sense of urgency that we had to now abandon some things and build entirely anew, but anew with everyone. And what it was going to do for our students. That was the common denominator and always should be, is put the students right there in the middle, like what's best for students. And that will help guide a lot of things. So we had a lot of data and research that showed that. We also had a lot of things from them that they were trying to get done that could be adapted. So I won't say it was bumpy, but it was managing a lot of new policy. You got students walking in the door saying, wait a minute, my little brother never had to take this. My big brother never had to take this. Why do I got to take orientation? I'm not coming. So you had to manage those types of things too. So there's new messaging on behalf of the college. So that required a lot of communication, new policy, and then also training, making sure our employees understood it and they felt comfortable with it. So again, it gets back to a lot of those 3 C's I was talking about: caring, change, and then just over communicating, but don't overwhelm them.
That's good.
So in the end, it came out fine, but it was tough. We created a task force, and people had their feelings hurt over not being on that task force. Everybody felt ownership of the process prior to this, and then all of a sudden, a small group was managing it, and they felt either in the club or out of the club. And I was not prepared to be the chair of that, leading that across our college at that moment in my life. And I was starting the Ferris program. So I was like, oh, I need this in my life right now. So yeah, again, it gets back to caring and then celebrating several small victories along the way, I think is important too.
So my next question has to do with trust and transparency. Those are two things you talked about. And obviously they're important to be a successful leader. But how do you build and maintain trust among your team members and the whole college community?
So a couple of ways. You have to get to know them. And there's that caring word again. But you have to get to know them beyond just the phone and the email. And we all have these people in our lives, right? The caller ID pops up and you're like, oh, great. That person only called me when I've got a terrible problem that I'm about to find out about.
Mhm.
And if that's the way your relationship is, that's the way it's always going to be. So you've got to figure out those types of people in your life too that you can work very closely with and have a. So what I do is I have that person in my life. I won't say who they are, and they're a great professional. But when the phone rings, I'm like, oh, great, this is always going to be bad. I made a point, an intentional point, that I go visit that person at least once a week and step in the doorway. It's made a big difference because then our relationship isn't always trying to deal with some major issue. We know each other in and out of that issue now too. So relationship building, I think, is really, really important. The second thing for them, making that first move and always asking, what can I do for you? And not sounding like a salesperson either.
Mhm.
Hey, I saw you're working on this. That's really great. I'd love to highlight this more. Can I put you on an agenda for a college meeting and have you tell us more about this? We do a lot of communicating here. Like every other Friday, we do a college-wide Zoom meeting, and it's really just a fun virtual celebration. We do some updates, and then we just highlight key people and things going on. So there's little moments to slide people into opportunities to celebrate and to get to know them more too. So the other thing too is, always knowing what their goals are and knowing where they're at with those goals. And again, it's almost like I just mentioned, how do you help them get to that as well? And then just words of encouragement and making time for them as well. So anytime that I can, I have one-on-ones with people. And if I can do that um, outside of group meetings together too, I think it helps build a lot. I'll say that's the perk of being a small school. We
Mm.
have the ability to always be able to connect more and more.
I really appreciate your proactive approach to that as well. You're getting out there ahead of it, like that's awesome.
Yeah, that's why, getting back to some of your earlier questions, that's why I don't think I would be a good fit at a big school.
Mm.
I really like to go downstairs and step into someone's doorway and say, hey, I know this went down yesterday and it was really hard on you. And I wanted to check on you today because I thought you did an admirable job with it. But, I know you might be feeling this or that. And I just wanted to talk to you about it. That helps, right? I may not be able to do that if I'm in a large school.
Mhm.
And I may not be able to get to know the levels of leadership that fit my style the way that I operate now.
So mentoring and developing future leaders, you talked about that a little bit, like always kind of giving back. I've put down that it's essential for long-term success of an institution to be able to grow your own or be able to kind of, give back. So how do you approach mentorship and leadership development within your college?
In many of the ways I've already mentioned is making sure you're always there for people and you're always reaching out. And if I'm not the mentor for them, which I'm not always, I make sure I give them someone else. So, my dean is now going to be a VP somewhere else. She got that job, by the way. I've immediately connected her with other chief academic officers across the state. And I said, I think this would be a great pairing for you. A huge part of leadership really is growing other people. I know there's that old cliche, it's not about being in charge, it's about taking care of those in your charge. And it's true. So a rising tide raises all ships, right? So if you have the ability to really grow and inspire other people, position them for new things. And I think one of my approaches always too is getting them to step outside of their comfort zone.
Mm.
So when I talk with people, I often talk about what's the issues you're facing and how are we not avoiding those issues, right? It's easy to admire the problem, but try to build confidence in them to take on an issue that is really hard, but so relieving when you do take care of it.
Mm.
So I think that's really important, is to have the courage to have those conversations you never had before and mentor people to step into those things. There's the old saying, a good plan today is better than a great plan tomorrow. So my focus with a lot of people is just put a lot of things in motion and build from there. Nothing will be perfect along the way. We are we're not a perfect school. We have perfect intentions.
Mm.
So try to build things, get things in motion, stir some things up. And I always tell them, positively instigate some things. Go around and say, hey, what's going on with this? I didn't understand this. Figure out a way to, if you can do things better or change or have influence, do it. And it might be broken for a little bit, but it will rebuild and be better. So my mentoring has always been based upon that, is don't be too hands-on, but also influence people to put things in motion where it's possible. Sure.
Looking ahead, what do you believe are the most important leadership challenges that colleges will face? And how do you plan to adapt your leadership style to address those challenges?
Yeah, and I probably mentioned some of those things. I think you always have to be community oriented. That's always going to be number one. And I don't think that's a challenge. I just think that's the absolute expectation. You have to be good stewards and good servants to your community. But I think a couple things that are going to be big challenges are in those C's still. We're going to manage a lot of change, and we have to be speedboats about it. We can't be aircraft carriers turning around. We got to turn around rapidly. We know that we've got to work with our K-12 partners and all of our educators more, because college readiness is real, and that impacts our success and retention if we can't help make those connections. And then I also think that communicating with people is getting more challenging, but more dynamic at the same time too. So people don't, videos are very popular now, right? TikTok is very popular. So some might see that as kind of juvenile, but it's a reality in terms of another way to connect with the population. So we're going to have to be more dynamic than ever in our communications, and that's fine. Use all the different communications, but as I always say, don't overwhelm them, but find ways to connect with people, because oftentimes you look at your equity issues in your college and whatnot, they're tied to connecting with a group you've just never been able to engage before.
So finally, in retrospect, what advice would you give to emerging leaders who aspire to reach a leadership position within a college or educational institution?
What advice would I give them? Understand the mission, always. Understand the influence that you will have to transform many, many lives. And you might be looking at your current role saying, well, I do that already, but really push yourself out of your comfort zone to meet new people and to have an influence to influence even more thousands of lives. And I also would say that it's an opportunity to be a part of transformation you've never been a part of before. The community is counting on you. They're expecting you. They're hoping for you. And that there is nothing more important than being able to not only change a student life, but to change an employee's life too, along the way too. And to completely, reshape your community as being a part of that in that leadership role. So there's a lot of great initiatives out there that need leadership and they need representation at the table. And there's a lot of skill sets that are needed at that table. And I think we as community college educators, like I've said before, there isn't many tables we don't belong at. So there is such an opportunity to influence and be impactful in our roles. And if you don't like leading change, like I said before, you probably like it a little bit more than you expect if you work for a community college, because we respond so rapidly to so many exciting needs, and they need the time and the focus. And I feel like organizations rise and fall with their leadership. So it's an opportunity to get involved.